Nietzsche's Secret to a Fearless Mind. Imagine a demon entering your room at midnight, stepping softly beside your bed as the walls seem to inhale and the rest of the world holds its breath. He whispers a sentence that breaks your life into two halves. That everything you have lived, the heartbreak and the ecstasy, the wasted days and the trembling nights, your betrayals and your small acts of grace will return again and again in the same sequence forever. You will live it again, every pain and every joy, down to the taste of the same coffee, the same laugh falling from the same mouth. If this were true, would you curse the demon and collapse into horror? Or would you say, with a slow smile, "You are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine"? Friedrich Nietzsche wrote that question not to entertain despair, but as a furnace that would harden your soul until fear, that old house pet of modern life, understood it had a master. He was a man whose body failed him early, and often migraines like lightning strikes, eyes that burned, a stomach that tormented him. He walked alone in the high air of the Engadine Mountains, while Europe's cities crowded into progress, into factories, into the visible march of comfort. He did not look like a prophet of fearlessness. He looked like a quiet, exhausted scholar who had burned his bridges with the university too quickly, a friend too fiercely, and an age not equipped to endure him. Yet he kept a different kind of fire, and he fed it with what everyone else was trying to escape. Pain, doubt, exile, these were his kindling. He cultivated a mind like a cliff open to the weather, proud to be weathered. He mistrusted all urgings toward safety because he saw what they smuggled in. A bit of obedience here, a bit of self-betrayal there, 1,000 tiny surrenders, until a person no longer knew whose voice was speaking as they spoke. What he wanted, in an era that thought it wanted truth, was courage. The courage to face truths that made you tremble and yet not retreat. The courage to grow teeth without losing the capacity for laughter. The courage, finally, to be alone without becoming bitter. He did not mean fearlessness in the way of Hollywood heroes, who walk away from explosions without flinching. He meant something subtler and more dangerous. A fearless mind, a mind that knows what fear is and refuses to worship it. He presented no comforting doctrines and offered no tender gods. He said there are no facts without a point of view, and that view can be chosen by the brave. He said our morals, our pieties, our sanctities often hid the timid heart of a herd. He said if the price of being honest is to be despised by the fearful, then it is a low price for a very rare freedom. Here is the forbidden suspicion that glows at the center of his work. That fear is not merely a biological alarm, but a cultural art project, a style that has been taught to us, and that if we learn another style, fear loosens its grip. He believed our inner judge, the moral voice that scolds, shrinks, and humiliates us, was not a divine conscience, but a story told by the weak to imprison the strong. Not because the weak are evil, but because hunger builds systems. If you have to survive, you become inventive about making survival feel like virtue. Fear becomes prudence, cowardice becomes morality, and the will, that raw muscle of the soul, learns to bow and call it wisdom. He wrote like an arsonist writes manifestos, lyrical, aphoristic, with the clean cruelty of someone who has burned his last bridge and finally breathes. He begged you to distrust him, to take no sentence as gospel, to treat his books as steps you use and then discard. He turned philosophy into a mountain trail, and every page suggests a ledge you might fall from if you walk like a tourist. He told you to love your fate, not tolerate it, not endure it, but love it. not because fate is good, but because to love it is to become large enough to carry it. There is a secret at the center of his courage, but the secret is not a slogan. It cannot be worn on a shirt. It is not "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger," confiscated by posters and emptied of blood. It is more severe. It asks whether you will make a temple out of what broke you, whether you will learn a style that makes the wound sing without pretending it never happened. He calls you to a kind of sovereignty, to become answerable to yourself in ways that no applause can compensate and no law can replace. How does a person become like that? How does one unlearn the reflex to recoil? How does a man whose hands trembled from illness write sentences that carry a terrifying calm? He offers an image. You must become a lion. But a lion that learned from being a burden-bearing camel, and that will finally learn again to become a playing child. This is not a metaphor for a seminar. It is a description of a metamorphosis that cracks the ribs. It starts with bearing those heavy thou shalts of a world that tells you what to be. It becomes a roaring no that shreds a golden dragon who scales each glitter with a different commandment. And then, when the field is cleared, it becomes a child, a sacred yes that creates new games. The fearless mind is not born fearless. It is trained in deserts where the old gods cannot hear you. It is trained in rooms where no one answers your call. It is trained in that midnight experiment with the demon. If everything returns, could you train yourself to answer with joy? Could you take the worst day you have lived and place it on the altar of your life and say, "Be welcome again"? To do so feels like sacrilege to the habits that keep us upright. And yet the feeling of sacrilege is a measure of how much permission we have given fear to rule us. So the secret appears as a dare. If you want a fearless mind, love what you dread. If you want to be free, stop bargaining with ghosts. If you want strength, do not ask the world to be softer. Learn, instead, to be sharper, softer, harder, lighter, whatever the moment demands. Learn the strange art of affirming life before you explain it. Nietzsche's secret is not that life gets easier when you are brave. It is that bravery gives life a taste you cannot get any other way. He promises no peace. He offers a different kind of intoxication. He is not a coach. He is a tempter. He writes with a serene cruelty that asks whether you would rather be comfortable than be awake. If you cannot bear the question, his books will feel like a room you should not have entered. If you can bear it, they open like a cave where the air grows colder and clearer as you descend. At the bottom is not a monster, but a mirror. The mirror does not flatter. It shows you your fear standing behind you like a second shadow. And then it will ask quietly whether you want to keep it. Fear does not always announce itself with a scream. Often it comes dressed as reason, as kindness, as the voice in your head that says, "Be careful, be nice, be good." Nietzsche had a hunter's ear for tone, and he thought he heard behind so much goodness a tremor. Not compassion, not justice, but a quiet terror of life's chaos. The terror is understandable. Life is a storm under a blue sky. But he suspected that we had built our churches and our moralities not only to endure the storm, but to deny it, to pretend the wind does not love to change. He traced our fears to their genealogy, the way a family name tells you who survived and who told the story afterward. Long ago, he said, those who had strength and confidence named their virtues openly: courage, pride, generosity. They did not hide the sun of their power, and they did not despise weakness. They felt they could afford pity, because nothing in them feared infection. Then came the age of the wounded, the resentful, the clever, who did not have power but had time. They inverted values with a genius born of necessity. Humility became a superpower. Obedience became holiness. Chastity became nobility. And the old virtues strength, laughter, a beautiful arrogance were renamed sins. They created a court inside the skull and called it conscience. They turned instinct against itself and applauded the bleeding. Nietzsche did not see this as a crime against truth. He saw it as a triumph of strategy. But he asked a leaf-blade question. Is your conscience a compass or a leash? Does it point to true north, or does it pull your neck every time you try to stand taller? When courage feels like guilt, and ambition feels like vanity, and joy begins to feel like irresponsibility, that is how fear endures. It never says, I am fear. It says, I am good. It settles into institutions, but it begins in the heart. He remains ruthless about himself. He drilled into his own motives like a miner, not to shame himself, but to clear the tunnels. He did not trust the warm feeling of righteousness, because he knew how many lies it can carry. He cautioned that our sweetest moral feelings can be weapons of the weak, especially when we use them against ourselves. Fear tells us, be safe, and then it tells us, you are good for being safe. It converts caution into identity. Soon, courage feels like treason against your own image. His antidote was not a call to numbness. He despised numbness as a large, slow death. He taught sensitivity sharpened by selection. He believed that life in its fullness demands more feeling, not less, but that it also demands a new way of riding those feelings so they do not ride you. Fearlessness, then, is not anesthesia. It is an art that chooses its storms. He sketched the metamorphosis of the spirit as a fable of courage. First, the camel. We learn to kneel and accept loads, duty, discipline, the learning of old books, the humbling of pride beneath teachers and traditions. The camel stage is not cowardice. It is preparation. Without it, the lion is merely loud. But the camel eventually goes into a desert, into solitude, and asks itself, what is the heaviest burden that I can bear, and still not break? There, in a night where every certainty wears a mask, the lion is born. It roars no and attacks the dragon with a million scales reading, Thou shalt. It is not rebellions for rebellion's sake. It is the holy anger of a spirit that refuses to be told its measurements. Yet the lion cannot create. It can only destroy. The final metamorphosis is the child, the one who says yes, the one who invents. Childlike, not childish. It means innocence after knowledge, not before. It means play after pain, not ignorance of pain. It means creating values that taste like life, because they are not a reaction to fear, but an expression of strength. The secret to fearlessness must pass through these 3 rooms. If you skip the desert, your laughter will sound like a pose. If you never roar, your kindness will be resigned. And if you never learn to play, your victory will be bitter. He walked alone to learn these things in the language of his own body. He loved long hikes, the taste of alpine cold cutting the tongue, the way thought changes when feet keep a rhythm. He said only thoughts that come by walking deserve trust. He disciplined food, sleep, even friendship, like a sculptor disciplining marble. He built solitude the way a beekeeper tends a hive patient, armed with smoke, careful not to kill what he came to harvest. The noise of applause frightened him more than silence. It felt like a swarm that could exhaust him. And yet, lurking in the edges of his solitude, is a threat that even he could not wholly banish: the abyss. He knew the line well. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. The line is not a warning against looking. It is a warning against forgetting how to blink. A fearless mind courts the abyss, but refuses to marry it. It respects darkness without believing it is the only truth. The culture around him dreamed a dream of progress. Everyone was on a train, the scenery flying by, the destination shining with the promise of equality and comfort. Nietzsche's criticism sounded like a man pulling the emergency brake, tossing everyone's luggage off the car and asking, "Do you know where you're going? Or do you just like moving fast?" He did not despise compassion. He despised the fear that often hides inside it, the fear of conflict, of excellence, of the pain that growth demands. He spoke of herd morality, not to insult the many, but to remind each person how easily the many enters the one. We do not need a dictator to be unfree. A chorus inside us sings the approved songs before we wake. He developed a taste for masks. He called himself Dynamite, and then laughed at the drama. He wrote as Zarathustra, a fictional sage who speaks in riddles and starlight. He hid his assertions in aphorisms, because he knew the brain defends itself against sermons. A mask protects the face of a thought so the gaze can be endured. His masks were also tests. If you demand clarity at once, you have not trained your eyes. Let them adjust. Risk a misstep. A fearless mind can live for a while without final answers. It trusts itself in ambiguity, the way a ballet dancer trusts their balance on a thin line of muscle and breath. He understood, above all, the economy of fear. Fear is rich where choices feel scarce. Fear grows where time is tight, reputation is currency, and the past is heavy as a debt. He inverted it. He treated time as a material to be given form, not endured. He made decisions with a motto: what would I will if I had to will it forever? A terrifying question, until it becomes a game. A game that prevents smallness. You stop choosing as if tomorrow will save you from today. You choose as if every yes leaves a scar on eternity. Suddenly, fear looks small. It is loud, but it is small. And still, we feel the air gathering for a deeper storm. If the secret to a fearless mind is not bluster, not denial, not the dullness of numbness, if it is a style, a training, a way of willing, then where does that will find its source? What makes a person say, without teeth clenching, "I love my fate"? What could turn the weight of necessity into the weight of a golden chain you choose to wear? Nietzsche is leading us toward a door he has not yet opened. We can hear the hinges before we see the light. He calls it by a phrase that sounds like blasphemy against every complaint your heart keeps as a pet. Amor, Fati. Love of fate. Love not acceptance, not resignation. Love of everything that happened to you and everything you did. Love that does not edit. Love that doesn't say, "I love what made me strong, but not what made me ugly." Love that is ruthless in its generosity. It is the opposite of the grudge we hold against reality. It is the opposite of nostalgia for a kinder universe. It is a long, hard, joyful decision to bless what was, simply because it is yours. A fearless mind is forged in that decision, and it is a decision you will have to remake in countless moods. It has nothing to do with gaslighting yourself into thinking evil is good. It has everything to do with refusing to leave parts of your life unredeemed. Will you live a life that must exclude chapters as embarrassing, tragic, or unjust? Or will you live a life whose wholeness includes even the betrayals and cuts, turning them into a pattern you would accept again? If you cannot imagine the latter, ask yourself, whose standard of purity are you trying to meet? The herd's, the moralists, or the frightened child inside you who needed the world to make sense? The demon of eternal recurrence appears here again, but not to torture you. He is a personal trainer for the soul. He is forcing you to discover whether your values are heavy enough to carry recurrence without breaking. Most people, when first hearing the thought, recoil. The mind begins to bargain. I could endure my life again if we just remove that one night, that one year, that one face I shouldn't have trusted. Nietzsche's mind answers, then you do not get love fate, you suffer it. Amor Fati demands something like artistry. It asks you to give style to your character, to treat your life as a work of art in progress. You cannot edit life backward. You can, however, build forward in such a way that even the worst becomes a necessary contrast, without which the final image would be less alive. He gives you another pillar running through his thought, will to power. Misunderstood, it sounds like domination, politics, empire, but power is not primarily over others. It is over yourself, and it is for the sake of creation. Your will wants to expand, to overcome resistance, to grow in scope and subtlety. A fearless mind is not calm because nothing can hurt it. It is calm because it can digest. The will to power eats chaos for breakfast and calls it fuel. Where fear sees threat, the will sees possibility. Where fear demands guarantees, the will delights in risk because risk is the element in which strength can breathe. There is danger here. If you misread will to power as license to trample, you turn into what he lampooned, a vulgar strong man who calls their appetites courage. Nietzsche's will is elegant. It is the power to shape oneself, and therefore to shape the world like a sculptor, not a bulldozer. He admired cruelty, but the cruelty of a surgeon to a tumor, the cruelty of pruning a vine so it can bear fruit. First and always, that cruelty must be directed inward, toward your own cowardice. The fearless mind does not excuse itself. It notices where fear has manipulated the reading of reality, and it corrects with a steady hand. Then comes the twist that rescues will from fanaticism, perspectivism. There is no view from nowhere. He says only from some vital need. This is not relativism that shrugs at truth. It is a discipline of choosing perspectives that increase your strength to face truth. If a perspective paralyzes you, it is not noble to keep it in the name of honesty. If another perspective mobilizes you, try it. The same event can be interpreted as catastrophe or as challenge, as the end of a chapter or the beginning of your apprenticeship. The fearless mind does not lie to itself. It does, however, learn to look from angles that reveal paths rather than walls. How does this sound in a human day? You lose a job. Fear says, you are finished. Your identity has been evicted. A certain morality says, accept your humiliation. Perhaps it will purify you. Nietzsche's will says, interesting. What can we build from this energy? What part of you is asleep while that job made you comfortable? What habits can be killed now, and what experiments can be launched? Amor Fati whispers, difficult good. Now we will see who you are when nothing outside props you up. Eternal recurrence asks, would you be willing to relive this loss? Not yet. Then build a response that you would choose again, a response so precise and alive that even this wound, repeated forever, could find its place. He folds art into ethics at this point. He exhorts you to give style to your character, the way a poet chooses words. Not style as in decoration, but style as in form. A fearless mind is an artistic mind. It composes itself, especially under pressure. If pain is raw material, turn it into rhythm. If fear is noise, turn it into silence in the right places and thunder in others. If anger erupts, channel it into a clean cut rather than a flailing slash. This is not repression. It is choreography. Children understand play. They will turn a living room into a forest with a blanket and a broom handle. Adults forget. Nietzsche commands remembrance. Fearlessness needs play, because play is the victory over seriousness without losing intensity. When you can play with a problem, you are no longer kneeling under it. You have picked it up like a puzzle. The stance is lighter. Solutions appear that a grim face cannot see. Even laughter becomes a weapon. He loved laughter, not the soft laughter of diplomacy, but the laughter of someone who survived themselves and now finds, in the very structure of existence, a cosmic joke too large to explain. Laughing at the horror breaks the hypnotic spell of fear. It does not deny the horror. It denies the horror's right to rule. Solitude returns as a teacher, too. He instructs you to choose your company as a jeweler chooses a setting for a stone few, hard, and bright. Friends who sharpen you, not flatter you. Books that disturb you awake. Landscapes that force breath into your chest. The fearless mind is not a hermit's prize, but it cannot be found in a crowd. Crowds are always murmuring. You take on the hum in your bones. To reclaim your voice, you must step away until silence reveals the register of your courage. He writes of self-overcoming with a tenderness that looks like stained glass light on stone. To overcome is not to erase the past self. It is to absorb it, wear it inside, and then go further. The cocoon is not despised by the butterfly. It is included. A fearless mind loves earlier versions of itself with a smile and a shake of the head. How earnest you were! How necessary that you were exactly that earnest so that you could be this free. The fearless mind's greatest strength is continuity, the ability to keep promising itself something and then keep meeting that promise through storms. All of this requires energy. Where does it come from? Nietzsche's answer is a kind of spiritual metabolism. You feed yourself on what enemies would use to starve you. Mistakes, losses, insults, you burn them. You turn resentment into fuel by refusing to sit with it like a story you tell at parties. You banish the secret pleasures of victimhood. The hardest renunciation is not of comfort, but of moral superiority derived from suffering. Give that up, and a fierce calm grows. The calm is not emptiness. It is readiness. You might misunderstand him as bronze, as if he woke fearless and hammered his life into the shape of his words. He did not. He broke. In Turin, he saw a horse being whipped, threw his arms around its neck, and fell to the street. Soon after, the mind that had sketched a philosophy of weatherproof poise was struck by a lightning storm from inside. For the last decade of his life, he could not guide himself. He wrote letters signed, "The Crucified." He drifted, tended by a mother who could not understand him, and a sister who would later betray his thought to flatter her own vanities and the politics of a nation that needed a false prophet. A fearless mind is not a mind immune to collapse. That is not the promise, and anyone who sells it to you has never sat with someone at 3 a.m. who cannot stop shaking. Nietzsche's fearless mind knew that he too could drown, and perhaps he did. This is where his philosophy stops being a victory march and becomes a human story. The man who told you to say yes to your fate met a fate that we struggle to say yes to. His works were misread by monsters. His name became a talisman for regimes that had no ear for nuance. He never saw the world that might have understood him. So what is courage worth if it cannot save you? The question is raw, and it is fair. He would answer with a strange softness. Save you from what? From death? From loneliness? From being misunderstood? The fearless mind does not promise rescue from those. To attempt to bargain for those rescues is to be back in fear's temple, laying flowers before a god that will never visit your house. He offered something else, something more modest and more exquisite, a chance to live as if you were worthy of the world that hurt you, the chance to create a self that could look back and say, thank you, even to the nights that split you open. His madness becomes, in this light, not a contradiction, but a reminder. We are mortal. We shatter. We inherit bodies that betray us and ears that misread us. Fearlessness is not an insurance policy against that. It is a way of loving the span we are granted so entirely that even a ruin gleams. And in that ruin, something endures. He had written sentences that would outlive him, that would disturb the sleep of complacent centuries. He had loved the clean air of mountain thought enough to bottle some. He had danced with the abyss and taught us how to dance without letting go of the rope. Let's step closer to the place where his courage touches the nerve of our time. We fear being unchosen. We fear being wrong in public. We fear the silence that follows when the phone is set down and the room becomes our judge. We fear, deeper than all that, the sense that our life might never have been ours. His fiercest suggestion is that ownership of the self does not require favorable odds. It requires consent. Consent to be everything you are. Consent to use what you have. Consent to revere what you cannot change, because resisting it would cost your sovereignty. He says, stop trying to trade your fear for a different fear. Approach the root. Erase the debt that you think you owe to a world that promised to love you if you behaved. Love yourself without witness. That is dangerous. That is freedom. He writes of dancing stars being born out of chaos. It has become a line for mugs and dorm walls, but in his mouth it tastes like blood and laughter. Chaos is not only outside, the wars, the markets, the storms. Chaos is within the moods that change without permission, the memories that wake uninvited, the longing that grows loud at 5 p.m. and won't explain itself. Out of that, can you make a star? Not by silencing chaos, but by giving it orbit. A fearless mind is a kind gravitational field. It does not annihilate its comets and fragments. It teaches them to circle in rhythm. Notice how this courage sits with tenderness. He was harsh with his sentences, but he wrote about friendship with reverence. In Zarathustra, he praises the friend who is for you a third thing, not a mirror. The friend who does not pity you when you fall, but waits for you with a hand and a joke, the kind of joke that feels like sunlight. Fearlessness that cannot love is a costume. He believed in hardness without cruelty to others, and in gentleness without surrender to yourself. The balance is difficult. It requires daily composition. But when it lands, it looks simple, like a door that was always in the wall. He even forgives your past by transfiguring it. Guilt is the most efficient fuel fear ever found. Nietzsche proposes a different engine. He asks you to make a festival out of the past, a ritual in which you parade your mistakes and call them necessary. Not because you are a sociopath who feels nothing, but because you refuse to let guilt keep renting rooms in your mind at a premium. You choose gratitude, a gratitude that does not erase. You do not whitewash. You say, I did that, and it costs, and I pay, and I grow. The payment is learning, the growth is strength. The silliest part of guilt is that it imagines itself noble. The noblest part of courage is that it no longer needs an audience. And then there is destiny. He has a word that makes modern ears twitch. Fate. We have been trained to hear it as doom. He hears it as a dance partner. Fate is not a tyrant. It is a tempo. You do not choose the music, but you do choose your steps. The fearless mind loves the tempo so much it seems to bend it. You watch someone like that move through catastrophe, and you think the world softened for them. It did not. They became flexible enough to hear the beat even when the melody turned sour. They move with it. Their joy is not denial. It is a discipline so mature it looks effortless. He dies before the century can show him what it will do with him. His sister edits, excises, collects fragments into lies. The worst men of a nation use his words as camouflage for their own smallness. Then, after fire and ruin, the careful readers return. They find in the rubble the lines that still breathe. They see that he called himself the last disciple of the philosopher Dionysus, who loves life beyond good and evil, not without goodness, but beyond the consolations that goodness tries to buy. They read him as a man who built a temple to affirmation on ground where denial had been erected like a fortress. There is an image he would have liked, a violinist playing on a ship's deck as it approaches a storm. The bow does not slow. The notes do not grow louder to pretend victory. The musician loves the song enough to keep it, even when the air changes. Fearlessness is not throwing the violin overboard to row harder. Fearlessness is playing so intensely that the rowing takes the rhythm. If we can learn that, he suggests, there is no storm we cannot enter with a secret smile. Try a small, precise experiment. Tonight, before sleep, imagine the demon leaning down to you and whispering that you will live this day again and again, forever. Not a general life. This day, the coffee you poured too quickly, the conversation where you hid, the glance you almost gave and then swallowed, the message you did not send, the breath you forgot to take before you answered. Could you bless it? If not, what will you do tomorrow so that you could? This is not a productivity challenge. This is the slow construction of a fearless mind, a kind that does not beg the world to change before it does. There is a harsh compassion to this work. You will find parts of you that have treated life like a negotiable contract. You will hear the phrases, when I feel ready, when I am healed, when things calm down. You will realize that endless readiness is fear, wearing a robe that smells like wisdom. Nietzsche would urge you to roughen your tenderness against yourself. Be kind, but with teeth. Set a standard that is not the herd's, and measure yourself against it when no one is watching. When you fail, and you will, do not kneel to shame. Bow to it like a ritual, and stand up again, smiling like someone who has discovered a new way to become dangerous to their own excuses. The secret is not hidden in libraries. It is hidden in plain view, in the next discomfort you avoid. A fearless mind runs toward discomfort the way a long-distance runner runs toward the hill. Not because it is pleasant, but because you have learned the sweetness of strength after effort. Choose this once, then again, and soon it becomes a kind of taste. The tongue wakes to the bitter and the sour, and discovers they are part of the feast. You stop asking for a life that tastes only of sugar. You start cooking with the whole spectrum. Carry a handful of his images as talismans. The camel kneeling to learn. The lion saying no to the glittering commandments. The child saying yes to the game he has invented. The abyss staring back until you laugh and blink and invite it for a walk. The dancing star, born of chaos, light that owes its existence to a storm. Amor, Fati, sung like a hymn with coarse, cracked, grateful lips. These are not metaphors to admire. They are doors. Walk through one each day. Watch which fears lose their shape. Notice how the world changes shape around a person who has been practicing. Their speech grows clean. They waste fewer words defending themselves. They ask better questions. They do not rage because the world refuses to be predictable. They wear unpredictability like a well-tailored coat. They forgive faster, and their promises are iron. They do not seek safety as their highest good, and yet others feel safe near them because their presence has gravity. They do not pretend to be fearless. They demonstrate it by choosing where fear does not define the map. And on the nights when you do not believe, when the old gods of security whisper, when your hands shake as you consider the step you must take, remember how fragile he was. Remember the headaches that blinded him, the solitude that carved him, the collapse that took him. Remember that fearlessness did not save him from being human. It made his humanity luminous. You do not need to be invulnerable to be brave. You need to be willing. Willing to look at your fate the way a lover looks at the beloved flaws and all, history and secret wounds included, and say, my God, I want you. There is something scandalous about saying yes to pain. It sounds like madness or masochism, but the yes is not to pain itself. It is to the life that comes with it. Pain is a messenger, a border guard, a teacher who charges high tuition. Say yes to the course. Do not idolize the teacher. Harvest what is yours. Leave the rest in the field. And go on. The shape of your life will start to curve toward a horizon you can feel but not outline. You will suffer still. You will lose. People will misunderstand your laughter. But you will not fear the abyss as before, because you will have learned the weight of your own steps. You will have trained your will like a falcon, fierce, patient, coming back to your glove not because you chained it, but because you fed it wisely and released it often. You will find yourself at midnight, on a day you once would have wished away, and if a demon comes, you will listen like a conspirator, nodding, yes, again. If this sounds impossible, begin where you are, with what scares you and is small. Tell the truth in a conversation where you would usually edit yourself to be approved. Choose the book that disturbs your certainties instead of the one that flatters them. Walk farther than comfort suggests. Spend an hour alone without a screen and see what you think when nothing thinks for you. When the old fear clutches at your chest, do not push it away. Invite it to sit. Ask it what it serves. Then stand up and choose as if you will have to choose the same forever. You will have made one step into Nietzsche's secret, and the ground will feel different, harder, yes, and also more yours. No one can do this for you. That is the terrifying beauty. You are the sculptor and the stone, the dancer and the rope, the listener and the demon. You can make a fearless mind out of the materials of this life, not the next, not the imaginary. That was his message, written in sentences that taste like snowmelt and iron. He asks, will you build, or will you continue to complain about the slope of the land? If this opened your eyes, Subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.